from Hollywood, I'm Martin Grove, welcoming you to our Screendollars podcast, Box Office Autopsy. Today's special edition of Box Office Autopsy looks at the month of October and some of its most promising wide releases. Joining me on the line now is one of Hollywood's best-known and most widely quoted box office experts, Paul Dergarabedian, who's analyzed weekend ticket sales for nearly 30 years, the last 8 of them as senior media analyst for ComScore.
Well, Paul, it has been a fantastic September, even a marvelous September, or at least if you're Disney and Marvel, thanks to Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, and I think we're looking at what could be an overwhelmingly good October.
I agree, Marty. This has been quite the post-summer period at the box office with Shang-Chi, as you mentioned, breaking Labor Day records, and with just an incredible performance that I think spoke volumes about the importance of having great content in theaters. It's all about the movies. It's about the movie-going experience, but it's the movies that bring people in, and it's the exhibitors who keep people there and coming back for more.
Well, you know, Paul, over the years, the distribution executives that I've talked to and relied on for help and information have all said privately, it's a product-driven business. And they were all correct. That's what it is. If you have the product, people come and see it. And if you don't have the product, then they don't come. But what happens is that Wall Street and the media sometimes make the mistake of saying, well, gee, you know, they're worried about the Delta variant, they're worried about whatever it might be, when it's actually, they just didn't have a movie that they did want to see.
Well, I'm so glad you say that, Marty, because it's the ebb and flow of the box office has more to do with the movies themselves than any other factor. And it's been proven week after week. And like you said, if the content's there, you know, if you build it, they will come. That's a much belabored and overused cliche, but it's so true because when you had Shang-Chi open $94 million for the 4-day Labor Day weekend, obliterating Labor Day weekend records, and then also Free Guy from 20th Century Studios, obviously part of Disney. Free Guy dropping 7% in its 6th weekend, and let's remember, Shang-Chi and Free Guy are theatrical first. And that's why I think they're enjoying this long-term playability with Free Guy over $300 million globally and Shang-Chi over now at this point, probably over $325 million globally as we record.
Yeah, and Paul, that's in a world where so many people have been saying theaters are closed internationally, COVID is ravaging abroad, and so forth, but those worldwide grosses are growing, and clearly it's a product-driven business no matter where you are on the planet. And for the month of October, it's going to begin, I think, on a very good foot, because you've got from Sony and Marvel Venom, Let There Be Carnage. So I think that when that arrives to start the month, October 1st, and remember, Sony made what I think was a smart move, taking it off of October 15th and saying, hey, business is so good, let's get in there early and get more of it.
And that's so different than what we've seen before, where studios a year ago were moving films back further and further in the hopes that the industry would come back. Now the industry has come back in a really strong way, and that vote of confidence by Sony moving Venom up to October 1st is a great way to kick off what you perfectly described as, I think, a blockbuster month for sure.
Well, and with Venom, I think there's the advantage as well of a PG-13 rating, not an R rating, so that those under 17s who love this kind of product are able to buy a ticket. as opposed to sneaking in with a ticket to something else. Venom, of course, being a sequel, Tom Hardy is coming back as Venom, and the 2018 original worldwide was just over $856 million. So this is a big film to follow in the footsteps of a big film.
It's a big deal, and I think audiences are really psyched for all these big titles on tap for October.
And you know, Paul, looking at the tracking on Venom, the strongest tracking is for men over 25, but just about 2 points below that, you've got men under 25. So it's very, very strong with men of all ages. Less strong with women, but still, respectable scores. So, we could see, I think, some very good business, and we'll be waiting, of course, to see what ComScore and you report for that weekend. It'll be a big number.
That's one to look out for. Michelle Williams also in Venom.
Yes, and coming back from the first film.
Correct.
So the nice thing about October is that it's not all about Venom, the way September was all about Shang-Chi. Just a week later, there is a very small film, not really, and that's the 25th Bond episode, No Time to Die, coming from MGM and Universal and, of course, Eon Productions. And that is Daniel Craig's last appearance as 007. And we're going to talk about that, but just before we do, just to sort of set the mood, here's Ralph Fiennes as M, wondering where is Bond? Let's give a listen.
Come on, Bond, where the hell are you?
If we don't do this, there will be nothing left to save.
That was Ralph Fiennes. He plays M, of course, in No Time to Die. So, Paul, this picture is one that has been so highly anticipated. It's bounced around release schedules, for the last 2 years, I think, driven by the pandemic issues. But it's finally surfacing, and it sure looks like it should be a box office giant.
Well, where the hell are you, Bond? Indeed. I think, film fans and just those of us who love the James Bond series of films have been waiting for this movie for so long. No Time to Die was one of the first films to move off the release calendar in reaction to the pandemic. It was originally set for April 8th of 2020, and then it moved to November of 2020, November 25th, and then it moved to April of 2021, and now I think it's almost here, and it's not going to move, and it's going to be only in theaters. No Time to Die, October 8th. We can't wait. I think this one's going to have a great debut and very long-term playability, a lot of pent-up demand for 007.
And Paul, even though it's not going to be here until October 8th, it is, as you know, opening in the UK on September 30th, so you'll be reporting the international numbers on it.
That's right, and that'll be a good indicator, and of course, UK is the perfect spot for Bond to debut, but this is just a movie that so many of us have been waiting for. It's finally almost here. UK gets it first. We're all very jealous. But thank goodness Bond is finally almost here. In theater.
And that, Paul, that UK opening is going to be at over 700 cinemas, which will make it the biggest release of the year in the United Kingdom. Black Widow had been the biggest to date, and that was about 650 theaters. So this is a big deal over there.
Very much so. And it's just an iconic series of films, ongoing for 60 years or so. I can't think of another franchise that is still as viable, beloved, and anticipated as the Bond franchise for this many decades running.
It definitely is a picture that I'm looking forward to seeing, and I don't say that about too many films, to be totally honest with you. So this is one that I do want to see. And also, it's probably worth pointing out here that if you want to see this picture, you got to go to a movie theater because it is not streaming.
That's right. And I think for Bond production team, Eon Productions, it's been a very important part of the DNA of the Bond franchise. These have always been theatrical. I can't imagine Bond going straight to streaming or anything like that. Although in the very early days of television, there were some there was Bond content, I believe, a Casino Royale live.
Yes, that the original. It was a CBS television network production, and it was an American Bond. And that was the first deal that Ian Fleming did, the first time that he sold rights. And then he was unhappy with it, and he didn't want to sell the rights to the Hollywood movie studios, and it took a long time to work out the arrangements to make it happen. And I think the short version of this story is that Ian Fleming's attorneys told him that to establish the value of his books as part of his estate, they needed to do a movie deal to create, the real numbers that would give them that valuation, and he did it, and that's why we now have 25 Bond films.
Isn't that amazing? Look at your knowledge of the history of this, Marty. It's incredible, too, because if you think about it, I believe it aired in October of 1954. Barry Nelson played Bond.
Exactly. Right? And just thinking back on this, because I am something of a Bond historian, Sean Connery, who was so marvelous as Bond, was not the first choice, but it was an expedient choice because he was affordable. And of course, he was a Scotsman, not an Englishman, and that made a big difference, to the point where Fleming later, in one of his upcoming books, after Dr. No, the first of the Bond films, Fleming wrote into the storyline about Bond that his father was from Scotland. So that, in a way, explained the Scottish accent. So...
Such great history, because this is such a long-running, not just movie franchise, but obviously the books. The character is iconic. Sean Connery, for many of us, our favorite Bond, but I will tell you, Daniel Craig, an amazing and inspired choice for Bond. He's been absolutely spectacular in the role, and I hate to see him go. I presume this is his last outing as Bond, but what a way to really put a capper on just an incredible run for Daniel Craig as James Bond.
And Paul, I think that what we're going to see are a lot of moviegoers heading for cinemas to see this movie because it is Daniel Craig's last time as Bond, and of course nobody knows yet who is going to be the new Bond, but even we don't know that. So
that's right.
But look, there are certainly not only a new Bond on the horizon, but other pictures in the month of October. And as we get to the 15th of the month, mid-month, it's perfect timing to be thinking Halloween, and that gives us Halloween Kills, the next episode in the rebooted Halloween series. It goes back, of course, to 1978. Jamie Lee Curtis still starring and still tremendously wonderful in the role. This picture has been a great first-choice tracking for younger women and younger men, typically the audience for horror films and certainly classic horror films. So we're going to be seeing that. And just, again, to put us in the Halloween spirit, let's take a look at this scene. It starts very innocently with some kids on a swing at a playground, but it gets scary. Let's take a listen.
Hey, what are you guys doing out here?
It's Halloween. We've been trick-or-treating.
Are you alone?
There's a creepy man in a white mask.
Where?
And he keeps, trying to play hide and seek with us.
Where did you see him? Look! Oh my God. Run! Go home now!
a moment or two from Halloween Kills, definitely scary. This one is rated R, so you got to be 17 or older to see it.
Well, we definitely love our horror movies as moviegoers, and the movie theater is the greatest place, in my estimation, to see a great horror movie, the electricity that's created in the air. And while often, as we've even spoken in the past of, that a PG-13 rating can generally get you a bigger audience, no question that with a really well-made horror movie, that if you can amp up the intensity, the violence and the gore and all that stuff that people go see a horror movie for, with an R rating can really push the envelope when in the right hands, that can be extraordinarily effective and very potent at the box office.
Well, in the case of Halloween Kills, an interesting wrinkle. Universal announced that they are also going to stream it day and date on Peacock, which is the Comcast NBC Universal streamer. And that will be interesting to see if that takes away. But I'm not sure that I'd want to see a horror film alone at home in the dark.
Yeah, especially with, the one of the scariest villains or, characters in the horror movie world running around outside your house. It's pretty incredible. And in the hands of Blumhouse, they have reimagined this franchise in such a authentic way, and having Jamie Lee Curtis there, all the better. She's just amazing as Laurie Strode, and what a knockout of a franchise. And I think, even though it's going to be available at home, you're going to have a lot of people wanting to see this in a theater about 2 weeks ahead of the actual Halloween holiday on October 31st.
Yes, and it's smart of them to open a couple of weeks before the actual date of the holiday, because Halloween is a holiday where people go out trick-or-treating, adults go to Halloween parties, hopefully in the pandemic era, you were still able to see people doing that, maybe a little more so this year, last year not. But in that case, this movie will be playing as the prelude to Halloween, and that certainly is very encouraging.
I think it's a great strategy. And look, Michael Myers is a fictional character that people just can't get enough of. I do know that there's another movie set for a year from now in the Halloween series called Halloween Ends, and so I don't know if we're to take that at its word, because none of these franchises ever really die.
Nor the killers, the villains never die. Just when you think they're dead, you see that eyelid opening again,
That's right. So I never believe it when, just because it's called Halloween Ends, except for October 14, 2022, I'll believe it when I see it, especially if this one makes a lot of money and then these both make a lot of money at the box office.
Well, speaking of making a lot of money at the box office, we have one other huge film for October to talk about, and that is from Warner Brothers and Legendary Entertainment. It is the sci-fi adventure epic Dune. And Dune is a film it was shot in IMAX. It's the kind of film you want to see on an IMAX screen, if at all possible. In fact, the director, Denis Villeneuve, refused to screen it digitally at the Toronto Film Festival. He said this film was just not meant to be seen streaming. It was meant to be seen in theaters, and he didn't care. It made Dune ineligible for the People's Choice Award at the Toronto Film Festival, because you had us both screen digitally and in theaters to qualify, but he didn't care. The picture got a 7-minute standing ovation at its premiere at the Venice Film Festival, and that has sparked a lot of Oscar talk. And before we talk about its awards prospects, let's just set the mood again by looking at the surface of the planet Dune. Oh, well, you can't see that? Well, just imagine it, because as the music starts now, we're looking at the surface of Dune.
planet Arrakis is so beautiful when the sun is low. Rolling over the sands, you can see spice in the air. The outsiders ravage our lands in front of our eyes. Their cruelty to my people is all I've known. What's to become of our world?
That was a quick look at Dune, and Paul, this is a picture that seems to loom not only as a box office success, but also as an award success. Do you see that ahead?
Absolutely. Denis Villeneuve is one of the greatest directors of, in the modern era. I rank him up there with the greats. His movies, Prisoners, Sicario, Arrival, Blade Runner 2049, which was a much underestimated and misunderstood film, both in terms of the movie itself and more so the box office. I just thought that was a fantastic film. Dune is a movie that is just meant to be watched on the big screen. It, I believe, will be available on HBO Max, as Warner said, for all their films coming out this year. But I think this will be a really good test of moviegoers, how much they love movies on the big screen. So in other words, if you're a fan, if you want to see the latest from Denis Villeneuve and you can see it in the movie theater or have the option at home, are you going to go out and see it in the theater? I hope so. That's how this movie is meant to be seen.
Well, exactly, and even though it will be there on HBO Max, it's just hard to imagine that even people who have giant-sized media screens at home, it's just not the same thing as seeing it in IMAX or another premium large format. The tracking on this picture is very good already. I mean, it's still 4 weeks out, so there's a long way to go and to grow. But right now, the tracking as we speak is best for men over 25. It's a number above 50%, so it's a very nice number. But what also I think is encouraging is that all of the other demographic groups, younger men, younger women, and older women, are all in the mid-40s. So we're looking at what could be maybe a 4 quadrants movie for Warner Brothers.
I think it could be. And if you look at the cast, Timothée Chalamet, Rebecca Ferguson, Oscar Isaac, Josh Brolin, Stellan Skarsgård, just an incredible cast. I just think this is going to really be a test of that ability for a filmmaker to inspire fans and moviegoers to go to the movie theater, even though this film will be available on HBO Max. Who knows, Marty? Maybe people, if I go see it in theater, I fall in love with the movie, I'll come home and maybe watch it again on HBO Max. But first and foremost, I got to see this on the big screen. Again, Dune, this title has had quite the cinematic history, and based on the novel by Frank Herbert. And Dune could not be in better hands than with Denis Villeneuve and his production team and this cast.
Yeah, I think we're looking at a big picture there, and as well at a huge success ahead, most likely for Venom and for No Time to Die, and for Halloween Kills, which is tracking great. So a very strong month. You touched just now on something that we should talk about briefly, and that was the idea of someone seeing it a second time streaming. Because, as you know, over the years, people used to go back to see a movie they loved. Sometimes people would just get back online and see it again. Right there, or perhaps the next day. But now streaming does tend to cut into those second weekend repeats, and that's not the best thing in the world for the business.
Right, and I think that's again why so many of the filmmakers love that theatrical first release with, let's say, a 45-day window. That seems to ensure the greatest chance of long-term playability. And also, if you have FOMO, that fear of missing out, and you want to see a movie like Free Guy, guess what? You got to go to the movie theater. You can't just watch it again at home.
Yes.
So I think it's really going to be interesting to see how this all plays out. I think week in, week out, we're learning that theatrical first is best. Maybe 90-day windows, not, those days I think are gone, but a window nonetheless I think is essential for any theatrical film to be successful over the long haul, plus the perception of prestige. And it's not just a perception, it's a real thing. The prestige and exclusivity of a theatrical first run, there's nothing like it. It was true pre-pandemic, it's true now.
Well, over the years, we have seen that even when there was a 90-day window, pictures would do the bulk of their business the first 3 weeks, and then a little more in the fourth week, and after that, it's a trickle of ticket sales. So I don't know that, dramatically shortening or cutting in half the 90-day window, I don't think that's, a horrible thing. I mean, I understand that theaters would prefer it, but I don't think it takes that much away. I mean, we've just seen Shang-Chi and how well it's done in September. As we're speaking, it's going into its fifth weekend, but it's basically done its business. It's closing in on around $200 million now. Very good money for these days, and without suffering from not having had a 90-day window.
Yeah, I think, and also too, an extraordinarily long window doesn't help theaters to have a movie in their, taking up a screen in an auditorium if you're not filling those seats. So it's better to move it out of there actually, and then get another hot movie in, and just keep that cycle going. 45 days, lean and mean, get the films in there. Like you said, they make the bulk of their box office in those first, 2-3 weeks anyway, and then. And the thing is, a theatrical first movie that does well has more value when it hits the small screen. So that big screen is complementary and additive for the small screen, not adversarial. So I just think it's a win-win for all the studios. And we saw Disney recently decide they're going to go theatrical first. And and then look at Shang-Chi and Free Guy. They're reaping the benefits, Disney, of those theatrical first style releases.
Well, look, Disney, I think, was very smart to put an end to day-and-date streaming this year. Warner's, I think, was very smart to say, look, starting next year, we're not going to do it either. So these all augur well for the future of exhibition. And one of the great things to point to is that whatever happens at the box office, we will find out about it by your ComScore reports, day and date on the Sunday of whatever weekend it is. And I look forward very much to that and to talking to you again here on Box Office Autopsy. Paul, thanks very much for joining us.
Great to be here. A true honor to be with you, Marty. You're a legend, and your knowledge of the business and just your enthusiasm is inspirational to me. So thank you.
You're welcome. We'll do it again. And thanks to you out there for listening. And please join us again next week for another Box Office Autopsy.
Time now for our film flashback look at what was happening in Hollywood right around now, way back then. Let's set today's time travel dial for September 24th, 1939. If it weren't for Carl Laemmle, Hollywood might never have had movie stars. Laemmle, who died September 24th, 1939, at 72, came to America from Laupheim, Germany in 1884. He was managing a men's clothing store in Oshkosh, Wisconsin in 1906, when he became fascinated with Nickelodeon parlors, where people would pay 5 or 10 cents to view moving images in machines. In a few years, he was distributing movies, which led to producing them through Independent Moving Pictures, IMP for short, which he founded in 1909. IMP's offices were in New York, and its films were shot in Fort Lee, New Jersey. At the time, independent producers like Laemmle were fighting the Motion Picture Patents Company, which controlled Thomas Edison's patents for cameras and projectors. Laemmle was one of the first indies to challenge the Edison monopoly. He also had his own ideas about marketing movies, which were quite different from what early studios like Biograph and Vitagraph were doing. In those days, studios didn't reveal the names of people seen in their films because they knew actors would demand higher pay if they became well known. At Biograph, one actress with a big following was known only as the Biograph Girl. She was Florence Lawrence, and after Laemmle brought her to Imp, she became famous as America's first movie star. Laemmle also created the first movie publicity stunt. After signing Lawrence, she dropped out of sight in the spring of 1910. Imp started rumors that the Biograph Girl had been killed, making newspaper headlines everywhere. Then Laemmle ran ads with Lawrence's photo proclaiming, "We nail a lie." Not only wasn't Lawrence dead, she was about to make her next movie, The Broken Oath, for Imp. To prove just how alive and well she was, Laemmle had Lawrence appear in St. Louis, where the stories of her demise began. When fans pulled at her coat ripping off some buttons, Laemmle told the papers they'd torn off her clothes. Laemmle continued acquiring new stars, including Biograph's Mary Pickford, then known only as the Girl with the Curls. Imp grew and in April 1912 merged with 5 other indies to form the Universal Film Manufacturing Company with Laemmle as president. It evolved into today's Universal Pictures. In March 1915, Laemmle opened Universal City Studios on 230 acres of farmland in LA's San Fernando Valley. Before long, he was selling studio tours for 5 cents admission, including a boxed lunch. And that's it for today's podcast. Thanks for listening. We'll be back with another box office autopsy next week. In Hollywood for Screendollars, I'm Martin Grove.